My name is Kennedy Walsh, Lieutenant Commander, United States Navy. And tonight, my father called me the Special Ops Janitor in front of a table of men who still wear their class rings like armor. The word janitor slid off his tongue, smooth as bourbon, got a polite laugh, and landed on my chest like a thumb pressing a bruise. We're under a white tent on the grounds of an old riverside estate outside Savannah. The kind of place where live oaks lean in and listen. Claire, my little sister, wanted the dress whites for the photos, said they'd look sharp against the moss and the brass band. I said yes because it's her day, and because I've learned how to fold my edges in when family fills a room. I keep my back straight, fingers loose around a champagne flute I won't drink. Dad holds court near the bar, shoulders square, voice carrying the way it did when I was a kid, and orders were the weather. When he laughs again, the circle around him opens just enough for his eyes to find me. He lifts his glass. I match the gesture like a salute I don't owe. A waiter threads past with scallops. A camera flash pops, and somewhere behind me, a string of Edison bulbs hums. I am practiced at quiet, at letting nonsense slide, until a boy at the dessert table yelps, "Oh my God." Is that her on TV? Heads swivel so fast the tent rustles. Phones lift, screens glow, and in the blue-white light, I see myself in full dress on a stage in D.C. A ribbon pinned at my collar, a caption I never planned to explain tonight. The room inhales. My father's hand twitches. The crystal stem slips. The glass shatters. And for the first time all evening, no one talks over me. The crash of that glass was a clean, bright note in the middle of all the soft wedding noise laughter. Silverware. A saxophone playing something slow. People froze mid-bite, mid-sentence, watching champagne seep into the polished wood floor. My father didn't move to pick it up. He just stared, his jaw set, like the shards had betrayed him somehow. I wanted to let the moment pass, to tuck it into the mental box where I keep all the other moments he's undercut me, sealed up tight so they don't spill. But the room was still humming with that awkward energy, and in the space between heartbeats, I could feel eyes flicking from the glowing phone screens back to me. I turned away before anyone could read too much in my face. Claire was across the tent, her veil caught in a swirl of warm air from the open side flaps. She was radiant, busy, laughing with our cousins. She had no idea what Dad had said earlier, and I wasn't about to tell her. She'd always been the bridge between us, even when I stopped trying to cross it. It wasn't the first time he'd dressed me down in public. I'd learned to wear a polite smile, to nod like the joke was harmless, even when it sliced. In his mind, real service meant combat boots on hostile ground, rifle in hand, logistics, intelligence support. Those were shadows, not worthy of a salute. Never mind the nights I'd spent mapping extractions, the storms I'd greenlit because they'd hide our tracks, the weight of decisions I'd made, knowing the wrong call could mean folded flags. He'd made his opinion clear over the years, sometimes with a laugh, sometimes with a shrug. When I first enlisted, I thought if I worked harder, pushed further, maybe he'd see me differently. That hope wore thin after deployment cycles that ended with him asking if I'd done anything outside the air conditioning. So I came here ready to swallow whatever he threw my way. Dress whites pressed, shoes shined, smile fixed for Claire's photographs. I thought that would be the extent of my performance tonight, but as I drifted toward the cake table, the phone screens kept passing hand to hand, carrying an image I hadn't meant to share. My name, my rank, a headline about distinguished service in classified operations. I felt the weight of it shift the air around me, the way a storm front rolls in, and I knew, even before I looked back at my father, that nothing about this reception was going back to how it had been 5 minutes ago. I could still hear his voice from earlier, the way he leaned into the word janitor like it was a punchline he'd been saving for the right audience. A half-dozen men in press suits had chuckled, some out of habit, others because they thought they were in on something true. I'd kept walking then, my heels biting into the grass, my eyes fixed on the glowing edge of the tent instead of the knot in my stomach. That wasn't the first time I'd been reduced to a caricature in his stories. Growing up, our house ran on the same clock as his old Army unit inspection ready. No excuses. He prized discipline and toughness, but only the kind you could see on a parade ground. If your job didn't come with dirt under your nails and a weapon in your hands, it didn't count. When I signed my enlistment papers at 19, I thought I was meeting him on his turf. I threw myself into training, clawed my way into assignments that would test anyone's limits, and still I heard him telling relatives I kept the lights on for the real guys. At first, I laughed with him because it was easier than explaining what my work actually meant. Over time, the laugh turned into a tight smile I could wear without thinking. What he never understood, and what I never told him, was that some of the most dangerous work doesn't make headlines. You don't get parades for making sure a team has the gear, the intel, and the extraction plan they need to come back alive. You just keep doing it, because the alternative is unthinkable. I'd learned to stop looking for the moment he'd understand. Somewhere along the line, I decided it was enough that the right people knew the ones who'd been there in the room, who trusted me with the calls that mattered. And yet, standing there with the video circulating like a live current through the tent, I could feel the edges of that old longing again. Not for applause, but for the truth to be undeniable. For once, I wouldn't have to be the one to say it. Near the bar, Dad shifted his weight, scanning the faces around him. The champagne was gone, but his hand still hovered at his side, like he wasn't sure what to do without it. I stayed where I was, letting the hum of whispered questions build, knowing something had already tipped and there was no reeling it back. 18 months earlier, there had been no champagne, no music, no white tent strung with lights, just the steady hum of outdated servers and the smell of stale coffee in a converted warehouse somewhere in the Pacific. That's where I'd spent 72 straight hours, trying to solve a problem no one wanted to admit might be unsolvable. 2 of our officers working under deep cover had gone missing near the southern edge of the Philippine Sea. The last transmission we'd gotten from them was patchy, threaded with interference, and cut off mid-sentence. Intelligence suggested they were being held in a fishing village friendly to an armed militia. The clock was running out, and every hour made it less likely we'd see them alive. My job wasn't to storm a building. It was to make sure the people who could had everything they needed to get in and out without leaving a trace. That meant finding a vessel that could hug the coastline under radar coverage, arranging aerial refueling for our recon drone without alerting half the region, and cloaking our encrypted communications inside chatter about tides and fishing hauls. We had 48 hours, a skeleton crew, and equipment that should have been retired a decade earlier. When a typhoon warning hit, half the command wanted to scrub the mission. I pushed back because storms cut both ways. If we moved fast, the weather could hide us better than any stealth tech we had. We pushed a supply drop through the outer bands of the storm on a local cargo plane with forged manifest, medical kits, ammunition, extraction harnesses. Hours later, the comms crackled with the words, "Package secure." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The report filed afterward was 3 pages long. My name showed up once, buried in a list of logistics officers. 2 weeks later, I was back stateside, sitting across from my father at his kitchen table, listening to him ask if I'd done anything interesting lately. I'd said no, because in this line of work, the win isn't the story you get to tell, it's the people who get to go home. Back in the tent, the scent of buttercream and champagne drifted over from the cake table, clashing with the tightness in my chest. The band had slipped into something upbeat, trying to keep the reception's rhythm, but I could still feel the static in the air from that video making its way from hand to hand. As I passed near the bar, I caught bits of conversation, low voices that carried just enough to sting. "Yeah, she's Navy, but not. You know, that Navy." Laughter followed, short and sharp, like a cork popping. I didn't turn around. Years of training had taught me the discipline of keeping my steps measured, my face unreadable. Claire intercepted me halfway to the head table, her hands warm on my arms, her eyes bright. She adjusted the fall of my jacket, smoothed an invisible crease, and told me how glad she was I'd worn the uniform. She didn't notice the tension winding through me like barbed wire. In her world tonight, there was no room for it. I slipped back into my seat just as the toasts began. Glasses lifted, voices wove together in stories about love and luck and family. I let them wash over me, my fork idling above my plate, while the words from earlier replayed in my mind: janitor, paper pusher, not the real thing. A waiter leaned in to refill my water, his movement jostling the glass so that the surface rippled, scattering the string lights into jagged fragments. It reminded me of the storm that had hidden us on that mission, the way chaos could be both a danger and a shield. Somewhere across the room, Dad's voice rose again, that same easy boom he used to fill parade grounds. I didn't need to hear the words. I knew the script. I kept my eyes forward, focusing on the cake knife glinting under the lights, the chatter softening as more guests got hold of that phone. Then the music dipped, almost imperceptibly, and I felt the shift. Conversations thinned, heads angled toward me. It was like watching the tide turn quiet, steady, unstoppable. I took a slow breath, my palms resting against the edge of the table. Whatever came next, I wasn't going to rush toward it or away from it. Let it come. I'd spent years carrying truths no one else got to see. Tonight, for once, I wouldn't have to lift a finger. The truth was walking toward me, one glowing screen at a time. The boy who started it all couldn't have been more than 15, dressed in a navy blue suit that looked a size too big. He stood near the dessert table, holding his phone like it was proof of a ghost sighting. "It's her," he said again, louder this time, and a ripple moved through the crowd like someone had dropped a stone into still water. The nearest guests leaned in, their faces lit by the small screen. Then the phone was passed to another table, and another. I caught flashes of myself standing at a podium in Washington, the Hall of Heroes banner behind me, the row of ribbons on my chest catching the stage lights. The caption at the bottom read, "Lieutenant Commander Kennedy Walsh honored for distinguished service in classified joint operations." I hadn't told anyone, not Claire, not my mother, and certainly not my father, partly because the details were still under wraps, and partly because after years of hearing the same dismissive jokes, I'd stopped expecting anyone here to see me differently. Across the tent, Dad was still by the bar, but the easy grin had vanished. His gaze was locked on one of the glowing screens, his posture stiff. When the phone reached someone beside him, he took it without a word. I couldn't read his face from here, but I saw the moment his grip on the champagne stem shifted. Then crack. The glass slipped and hit the floor, scattering crystal shards across the polished wood. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the band faltered, one note hanging in the air too long. I didn't move. I let the silence do the work. Someone near the head table finally spoke, tentative. "Lieutenant Commander Walsh, is that really you?" Every head turned. I stood slowly, the scrape of my chair loud in the quiet. "It's me," I said, voice steady. My pulse was sharp in my fingertips, but my hands stayed relaxed at my sides. I hadn't planned for this moment. I'd thought I could blend into the background tonight, smile for the photos, keep my father's words from ruining Claire's day. But the truth was out now, carried not by me, but by a kid with a phone and a signal strong enough to reach every corner of this tent. I stepped toward the nearest table, where the video was still playing. The sound from the tiny speaker was tinny, but clear enough my own voice accepting the award. This honor belongs to the team who stood watch when others slept, who carried the weight when others could not, and who brought our people home. Hearing it here, over the faint rustle of dresses and the creak of chairs, felt almost surreal. A woman in a floral dress leaned forward, eyes wide. "What? What did you do?" I glanced toward my father. He was motionless, hands empty now, but the shards still glittered at his feet. "I did my job," I said. Then, after a beat, "And sometimes that job takes you places you can't talk about." Places where you have to make decisions fast and pray you made the right ones. There was a murmur through the crowd, like the sound of a page turning. I gave them the simplest version I could, how two of our own had been stranded in hostile waters, how there'd been no time to lose, how the storm had been both our risk and our cover. I left out the names, the coordinates, and the 72 sleepless hours. Some nodded, others just stared. At the back, an older man in a navy cap stood and gave me a crisp salute. I returned it without thinking. The MC stepped in, his voice lighter but careful. "Well, I think we've just learned we have someone very special in the room tonight. Let's raise a glass to Lieutenant Commander Kennedy Walsh." Chairs scraped, glasses lifted. The toast rolled through the tent, soft but sure. I caught my father's eyes over the rim of my glass. There was no smile, no apology, just the weight of something unspoken. Like a man standing at the edge of a map he thought he'd drawn perfectly, staring at a coastline that shouldn't exist. And I knew then this wasn't going to be the moment he told me he'd been wrong. That moment might never come, but I didn't need it the way I once thought I did. The reception found its rhythm again, though it wasn't the same. The laughter was softer now, the conversations threaded with glances in my direction, not the gossiping kind, but the quiet recalibration that happens when someone realizes they've misjudged you. The father of the groom, a retired Coast Guard officer, made his way over between songs. He leaned in just enough that his words were for me alone. I've worked with special operations before. They don't give out medals like that to just anyone. You've done something worth remembering. I thanked him, but my eyes wandered to Claire on the dance floor with our mother. She was glowing, spinning slowly under the lights, oblivious to the shift that had just taken place. That was how I wanted it, her night untouched by the kind of tension only family history could brew. I slipped outside for a breath of air. The night was cooler than inside the tent, carrying the faint salt of the nearby river. Strings of white bulbs swayed between the trees, their glow soft and steady. That's when I felt a tug at my sleeve. It was the teenage boy, the one who'd started all of this without realizing it. He looked almost sheepish now. "I didn't mean to embarrass you," he said, staring at his shoes. "My uncle's special ops. I've heard the stories. Seeing you on TV like that. I didn't think people like you existed in the Navy. People like me." I crouched slightly to meet his eyes. "What you saw on TV, that's one moment. What matters most is what no one sees. The work you do when no one's watching. That's the part that keeps the mission alive." He nodded slowly, the way someone does when they've heard something they'll keep turning over in their mind long after. When I turned back toward the tent, I caught sight of my father through the open flap, laughing with one of his old army friends. His easy grin was back in place, as if nothing had shifted at all. And maybe that was fine, because the mission tonight had never been to change him. It was to stand, without doubt, in who I was. I stepped back inside, letting the warmth and light fold around me. The music swelled. Claire spun in her gown, and the shards of my father's champagne glass had been swept away. It struck me then, some things you can clean up. Others, you just leave where they fall. I wasn't the janitor he imagined, but if cleaning up meant making sure my people came home alive, I'd do it every time. You don't always get the apology you want or the recognition you think you deserve. Sometimes the win is living in a way that makes the truth undeniable. And tonight, whether my father admitted it or not, the truth had already taken its place in the room and in me.